Lilly is an amazing story. The company is 150 years old. There's only a handful of American companies that are still sort of look the same as they did
Mm.
150 years ago. And so Lilly is one of them. It's a pretty good American company story, but they've really transformed over the last few decades. They were one of the first to develop the polio vaccine, treatments for COVID. They've had antibiotics, penicillin, many things over the years, and have been at the forefront of many different medical breakthroughs. But they had sort of a dry spell in between that couple decades ago that really made it hard. I mean, their stock price was down, there was CEO turnover, but now we've seen weight loss drugs really pull them out of that and make them into this trillion-dollar company and the most valuable healthcare company in the world. So it's a pretty amazing transformation and story of what happens to a company when they have a huge blockbuster product like these weight loss drugs have been.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about, as recently as June of 2020, we were looking at Pfizer as kind of the shining
Yes.
star of the pharma world because of its COVID vaccine. And Eli Lilly, did not come up in the same kinds of conversations. What you've done in your story is really highlight how much has changed between, say, 2017 to 2026. Dave Ricks became CEO of Eli Lilly back in 2017. And at the time, the pharma industry was not held in high esteem by Americans. There was a lot of mistrust directed at the pharma companies. He has helped turn that around. I wonder how much of the credit he deserves versus what was kind of already in the pipeline at Eli Lilly, and he was at the helm when it all came to fruition.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Scarlett, because over time, these drugs don't come out of thin air, and I think that that's one of the things that this GLP-1 boom really surprised people. Is like it seemed like it was sort of an overnight sensation that these weight loss drugs became popular, that people started talking about them. But really, scientists at both Lilly and Novo Nordisk have been working on GLP-1 drugs for several decades, and so it's something that has been going on behind the scenes for a while. But to Dave Ricks's credit, he was the one, when he became CEO, he was like, we need to move as fast as possible. At the time, Lilly was one of the slowest in the industry when it came to drug development. It took them 13 to 14 years to bring a drug from their labs to an actual approved product. And there's lots of trial and error in that too. Most drugs don't actually make it to an approval. And so he said, to all of their scientists and all of the executives at the time, like, we need to make speed the number one priority. And we need to look at everything we're doing, find the most promising science, and then go as fast as we possibly can. So that's what they did really with tirzepatide, which is the molecule that became Mounjaro and Zepbound. That's the active ingredient. And that was sort of like the pilot. That was the first time that they really did this and gave it the full speed treatment. And what we saw was that they were able to bring this drug really to the market in around 5 years, which is a huge reduction in time from what we were seeing before with Lilly. And so they've applied that across the board now to everything. And Dave Ricks has also taken steps to make the company more consumer facing, to engage more directly with patients, to cut prices when we've been seeing a lot of outcry and a lot of attention on how expensive GLP-1 drugs are. They're still pretty expensive, maybe not necessarily super affordable for all Americans, but to Ricks's credit, he's taken steps to cut the cash pay price of these drugs so that more people can afford them, because we're still seeing a lot of patchy insurance coverage with these obesity medications. So he has been, unafraid to take risks and to do things differently than his predecessors and then than his peers in the
Right.
pharmaceutical industry. So he does deserve a lot of the credit for that.
Madison, one of the challenges I think for managing these pharma companies and investing in these pharma companies is if you're lucky enough to get a really successful drug, sooner or later, patents expire and competition arrives here. How does Eli Lilly plan to deal with that with its weight loss drugs?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And that's something Lilly's, still trying to figure out. The strategy right now is to sort of deploy this cash that they have, this massive windfall from the success of its obesity medications, into everything. I mean, they're infusing billions of dollars into their internal R&D programs. So, focusing on the science that they have going on in their labs, but they're also looking externally. They've been on a record spending spree this year. Lilly was a company that typically didn't do as big of deals as its pharmaceutical rivals, but now we're seeing Lilly spend a lot more on other external science, acquiring different companies, doing more deals. So that's part of it. We're also seeing them spend a lot on AI. And AI is interesting in drug development because there's a lot of promise there, but so far we haven't seen a lot of that come to fruition in terms of, turning these AI, finding new drugs and those coming to market and being revolutionary cures for patients. Like that's not really happening yet, but it could happen one day. And so Lilly is spending on AI as well. They have a partnership with NVIDIA. They have a supercomputer at their headquarters in Indianapolis. And so they're also looking to AI and saying, if this is something that's going to revolutionize and change drug development, we want to
Mm-hmm.
be there.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're really doing everything they possibly can. But it'll be a fascinating story to watch because obviously right now we don't know what's going to happen. Lilly doesn't know what's going to happen. And it will be pretty incredible if they are able to sort of break out of this boom and bust cycle that every pharmaceutical company, in the history has sort of had to deal with.